Michael Gove this morning has been on the telly. I'm sure that's a joy for everybody. He was asked whether or not the statement by Frank Hester, the alleged statement by Frank Hester, merited extremist language. And instead of answering the question, he was asked it, I think, twice. Instead of answering, he said it's not language that he would support. And then, he was himself pursued by somebody who eventually killed one of his friends. Well, it doesn't answer the question, does it? He then tried to say that the definition of an extremist organization would be judged by relevant authorities, not necessarily by the government of the day, but by civil servants who are impartial. Again, it doesn't answer the question. The problem really is that we've reached a point where hate is filling the House of Commons, and as Lady Chakrabarti said, we're facing a level of extremism within Parliament, which I think is greater than the level of extremism that we might see out on the streets. And she says, well, we should start cleaning up our own house before we start lecturing to others. She talks about the hate-filled politics, and I think she's absolutely right. The place where extremism is most prevalent is in the chamber of the House of Commons and among the people who have been elected to represent us. I find that very disturbing. Guidelines have now been released. They're not going to affect criminal law, but they're intended to stop the government funding or engaging with groups that spread extreme ideologies or hate in their communities. So again, we're in that sort of, in that hinterland, in that envelope of uncertainty between law and what is socially acceptable. And again, we're coming to the same principles that I've been raising again and again and again, that there is this fog of offence which doesn't reach the level of a criminal conviction, but is a miasma of indiscretion that essentially says, this is not somebody I want to have in my house for a cup of tea. And I think what's interesting about that indiscretion, that miasma, that fog, that envelope, is it goes beyond a criminal conviction or criminal case. There are many criminals that I would be only too happy, after they've served their time, paid their price, to have in my house for a cup of tea. Many, because they know what they've done. It's a one-off thing. This is about a disease of contempt for other people, and I think that disease is infectious. So I think it's the same disease of contempt that allowed, for example, Diane Abbott to stand up 46 times yesterday to try to catch the Speaker's eye in order to make her own contribution to the Prime Minister's questions about a subject which affected her directly, where she was indeed the protagonist, and she was indeed the person referenced on innumerable occasions yesterday, and yet she wasn't allowed to speak. That indifference to other people, that contempt for other people, shown now by the Speaker of the House. I think I would follow John Nicholson's lead here. John Nicholson, a rather fine SNP member of Parliament, who is one of the few informed, active and incisive members of the Digital Culture, Media and Sport Committee. And he says that he thinks the Speaker's time is over. He doesn't serve democracy, and he doesn't serve the Commons. He's only self-serving. And this has to stop. We have to change the nature of Parliament. And I think before embarking on an extremism law, which again only, by definition, is only serving Parliament, about who Parliament will fund, who Parliament will receive funds from, by definition, this should be something that should rule out any Frank Hesters, and therefore make the Conservative government extremely cautious about keeping that Frank Hester money. This is a sticking plaster. Instead of couching everything, either you've got a law where something is criminally wrong, or you've got an invocation to do good. This is a suppression of bad in its own ranks. This is about rankers in Parliament. It's not about ordinary people. And as Flynn points out, it's downright bloody dangerous, the sort of language that Hester used, and the sort of bedfellows that the Conservative Party is nurturing. But they're bedfellows by a different breed in the Labour Party. The House of Commons is infected with hatred. It's just a matter of defining who you hate, which group you hate more. And that is not a way forward for the people who represent our country. That is scurrilous and wrong, and I don't think Gove's effort with an extremist law is actually entitled to protect our democratic values, whatever he says, to reinforce what we have in common, to be clear and precise when identifying the dangers posed by extremism. He's far from precise. He's far from clear. This is a sticking plaster and a diversion from the reality.